Russia will be fearing that what is happening at the moment will lead to a weakening of their alliance and support from Iran.
Let's now speak with Nicholas Hopton, who's a former British ambassador to Tehran. He's also Director General of the Middle East Association. Nicholas, welcome to the show. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How do you think this protest is shaping out? Do you think this feels different from protests that have gone before?
It does feel different from the many protests that have gone before since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Protests are nothing new in Iran, and we saw very big protests just 3 years ago following the death of Mahsa Amini, who was killed by the Basij security forces for wearing her hijab incorrectly. That brought out protests for months until they were oppressed and petered out. These are the biggest protests since then, but it does feel different on this occasion, and it's a combination of factors. Not only that it's very widespread across the country, as Oya just explained, it seems to be reports of protests in pretty much every province and major city in Iran. That's important. Also, the numbers on the street are important, although perhaps not the biggest protests we've ever seen against the Islamic Republic. The diversity of people taking part is important. But I think what is starting to distinguish this, and I wouldn't want to overstate it, but it is important to watch this. In the past, there hasn't been either a unifying opposition figure or a sense of unity ultimately between the various factions taking part in the protest. On this occasion, we're starting to see more of a common sense that it doesn't matter so much what replaces the Islamic Republic, as long as the regime either is very moderated and different in its behavior and how it treats its people, or is a different kind of government and a better kind of government for the people of Iran. That is starting to come together, and there is one figure from the past in particular who is becoming more prominent. He's not yet in a position where everybody is behind him, but that is the son of the former Shah of Iran, who was deposed by the Islamic Revolution. Reza Pahlavi is playing an increasingly prominent role in calling for unity, in calling for protests, and for the end of the regime, leading to a transition and then a more democratic society.
And we just heard there from Oya saying that her sense is the Iranian people don't necessarily want a conflict with outside government forces coming in to sort of get involved. Do you share that sentiment? And if that is the case, what is the tipping point when the current regime says, okay, fine, we hear you, we're off?
So I think Oya is picking up the same messages that I am from my contacts in Iran. And generally, there is a sense that this isn't the time for the West to intervene militarily, certainly not on the ground, despite some of the rhetoric we've heard from Washington. What is needed is more along the lines of what Donald Trump, but also European leaders, including Keir Starmer, have said, calling on the regime to stop oppressing, stop killing protesters, to respect human rights, to respect their Iranian constitutional right to protest, which is acknowledged by the Iranian government and is being ignored now. That kind of political pressure.
Sorry to interrupt, Nick. I mean, absolutely, but clearly this is not a regime that really listens to international pressure. I mean, people were aghast after the protests of women rising up, and that was meted out with extreme brutality. This is not a regime that listens.
Absolutely right. They will not do what the West asks them to do, clearly. However, they do respond to pressure, whether that's sanctions pressure, as Oya also flagged up as an important tool that the West has, pressure from increased sanctions, targeted sanctions on individuals in the regime who are either guilty of oppressing freedom of protest and speech and human rights, or regime leaders who are responsible for what is a very oppressive, brutal regime. So they don't listen, but they do respond to pressure. And the hope is that if the West, the world generally, keeps focus on Iran, doesn't get distracted by other geopolitical crises, then that pressure might lead to certainly less oppression and crackdown, brutality, deaths of protesters, but it might also gradually lead to change coming from within the regime itself, which is probably the way that change has to come ultimately.
And do you think that change is going to happen, and will that change be real, meaningful cultural change, particularly for women? I mean, my heart breaks looking at how women are treated in Iran.
Absolutely, the imposition of the hijab, the veil, and how that is enforced, and also the general condition, not only of women but people generally in Iran, is heartbreaking to see. And the Iranian people have so much talent, and that is apparent both from the people in the country, but also the Iranian diaspora in around the world, including in the UK. So yes, I think the Iranian people need to find their moment of freedom and rediscover their future with hope. Now, until recently, hope has been very much lacking. But the young people of Iran are leading these protests. Gen Z are really in the forefront of this and are being incredibly brave. Many of them are being killed, of course. We don't know exactly how many. And with an internet crackdown, is over this last few days, we don't know what's going on. But I'm afraid it's going to be pretty awful when we find out what has been happening. But
And
hope
Nick,
is that will, over time, I wouldn't want to predict when, but the regime is dying a death by 1,000 cuts.
a very quick question for one of our listeners, Brendan, who's just messaged in. If you would just really quickly, Nicholas, he says, just curious, how is all of this playing out in Moscow?
I imagine the Kremlin will be feeling worried that they may be in danger of losing an ally, because Iran has been a very strong ally, both militarily and politically, to Russia in its illegal invasion of Ukraine. So the way things are going at the moment, after the decapitation of the Venezuelan regime a week ago, Maduro was being taken out by the US forces. Russia will be fearing that what is happening at the moment will lead to a weakening of their alliance and support from Iran.
Nicholas, fascinating chat. Thank you very much for your time. That is Nicholas Hopton, former British ambassador to Tehran. And Brendan, that was a great question there.
مشهد پنجشنبه